Welcome to the Nurture Series. I'm your host, Chava Florin, and we talk about ways to nurture ourselves and our relationships. God knows we need experts. I know I sure do. Today on the pod, we have therapist and attachment expert Adam Lane Smith, who's going to tell us the secret to bonding in our relationships. Get ready, people. You're going to love this one. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Nurture Series. Today, we have a special guest. I'm so excited about him. What is attachment, you say? Well, there are three different kinds of ways that human beings attach to other human beings based on the way that they attach to their caregivers growing up. We're going to get really micro into what this is and how it shapes our relationships, how we nurture our relationships when they are a little bit stressed out. What is the secret to discovering how to bond? Whew. Big stuff. So excited. Welcome to the Nurture Series, Adam Lane Smith. I've had a lot of interviews on this podcast, but I have never been more excited about this one.
Thank you. I'm honored.
I follow you like every day.
Yep. Wonderful.
I wake up in the morning and like the first thing I do is say my meditations and all the good stuff. And then I get online and I'm like, what does Adam have to say today?
Well, I am glad to be here now that life is settling enough where I can talk to you.
Okay, good. I'm very, very glad. I'm so happy that you came on our show. A lot of our listeners end up talking a lot about how to nurture their relationships, nurture themselves. This is like at the cornerstone of everything. So in terms of like, how do we attach to partners, to people? How do we create communities? How do we create love bonds? All of these questions are things that we deal with on the Nurture Series. So
that's fantastic.
I've read the book, what is it? Attachment Theory, I think it's called, or it's called Attachment.
Attached. Yep. Attached.
Yes. I read that book. So I have a little bit of knowledge around what attachment is. I actually heard of it for the first time ever from you when you were being interviewed. Yeah. It was like a year and a half ago. And I think you were interviewed by Mikhaila Peterson, and I came across your interview and I was like, what is this geniusness? And I sent it to every single friend I knew. I was like, look at this guy, he's amazing. So it totally shifted everything in my life.
Me too.
So first question I have is, tell us a little bit about your background and where attachment theory comes from and exactly how you even stumbled upon this and what it is.
Absolutely.
3 questions.
Yes. Great.
So
I got it. Let's do it. I'll be a little, yeah, that's fair. I'll be a little more candid with you than I've been with other people because that's awesome. I love that. You are as passionate about attachment as I am. So, briefly about me, I grew up in a family where you had generational attachment issues and like extended family attachment issues all throughout the whole family. So I grew up surprised with attachment issues, very, very anxious attachment. And I stumbled through my childhood, stumbled through teens and into my early 20s. And I said, I got to fix this. And I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know what it was. I just knew like, wow, I'm like anxious all the time trying to get approval from people. And I hate it. And it's making my life suck. What do I do? Is there a name for this? I don't know because I'm too afraid to ask anyone. So I finally plucked up my courage and I just started opening up to my guy friends that were around me and saying like, dude, here's what I'm dealing with. Have you ever dealt with this before? And they're like, well, kind of. And we just opened up to each other and we connected and I started fixing it. And I met my wife and I was like, all right, I'm going to fix this in romantic relationships. So I said, all right, here's where I'm at. And she was like, okay, we can work on this. And we did, and we fixed everything. And I was like, what the heck did I just do? This is my very early 20s. It's like, what did I just do? What did I just figure out? Because life feels so much better now. What is this? Is there a word for it? Could not find any information on it. So I went to school. I said, I want to help other people do this. Went to school, got my master's degree in psychology, 6 years in school. It was an accelerated program built for people who are already working and wanted to get their training done. And the teachers were not just academics. They were people pulled from the field with decades of experience and then put into a teaching role and kind of trained up so they could teach. So the opposite of what most people get. So it was blood and guts, like in the trenches. Here's what you're going to see. Here's how to do the work. And like, here's some diagnoses, but don't worry about those as much. Do the work and help the human being. And that was the approach. And even so, our textbooks, I did run across something called attachment in a textbook. And I was like, oh, what is this? it's amazing. This is how kids connect to their parents. Maybe this is part of that piece of the puzzle. And the textbooks and everybody through the entire psychology community was like, nope, attachment does not matter unless you're working with 5-year-olds. Don't worry about attachment. If it is really attachment problems, it will always turn into a problem like a conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder for teens. They'll be stealing, they'll be in gangs, they'll be on drugs, they'll be violent. And if it's attachment problems in adulthood, you will always be a personality disorder. If it's not a personality disorder, you don't have attachment. So don't even worry about attachment. And that was the general gist of what we got for grad school. And I said, well, darn, I thought I had found this thing. But it always was in the back of my head, like reactive attachment disorder for 5-year-olds. I wonder if that's something. So I got out in the field, started working, and started asking other people, like, have you heard about, was attachment was a thing? Was this a thing? And they're like, well, it kind of sounds like attachment, but my grad school told me don't worry about that for adults because attachment is just for babies and kids. And everywhere I went, same experience. I started talking to international, other therapists and other psychology professionals in other parts, in other countries. Same thing. Attachment work? No, that's for babies. You don't need to worry about that for adults. And I was like, well, come on, there's got to be something. So I started working with people. And my specialty as a psychotherapist, it takes 6 years to get your master's, then 3 more years of apprenticeship to get your license. So 9-year training program to become a therapist. And then I specialized into severe traumas. I was the therapist that everybody else sent their most severe cases to. When they could not help someone, they sent them to me. I helped them fairly quickly. That was just what I specialized in, was finding solutions, getting them through, solving the problems, figuring out what was under the problem, and then solving that. And then the problems got easier instead of just, hey, let's only treat your diagnosis. It was what's the real problem. And so I specialized. Yes. So I started learning. At that point, I studied the works of a person named Dr. Robert Glover, who is, if I am a genius, that man is 5 times a genius.
How do you spell that?
And Dr. Robert Glover, he has a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And I read that book and it was like my world cracked open. And at the same time, I went to, at the time I was under a clinic director, and I talked and I said, look, I've got these clients who have generalized anxiety disorder. They've got panic attacks. They've got depression. And it seems like it's stemming from this thing called attachment. And here's some work supporting some of that, but I can't diagnose them with reactive attachment disorder because that specifically says just for kids. And they were like, well, Adam, if that's what you think they have, treat it.
Quick
Go
question.
For it. Please.
Reactive attachment disorder. Could you explain what is that?
Yes. So it's the test that they do on little kids. One test they do for attachment is they have mom sit in the room with the child, and they have the child. They see what the child does. If the child is clinging desperately to mom and shaking and can't go play, attachment problem. The child is terrified. If the child just leaves and bugs off and doesn't care where mom is, potential attachment issue. If the child starts exploring the room and then comes back and checks in with mom and then goes back and plays, then they have mom get up and leave halfway through. If the child freaks out that mom is gone and just cries inconsolably even when she comes back, if the child doesn't care that mom left at all, usually the child will cry a little bit and then mom will come back and then mom will console the child will go right back to playing. That would be secure attachment. But reactive attachment is where they are incredibly hypersensitive to their environment, terrified of abandonment, terrified of pain, terrified of loss, terrified of other people. They don't know how to react to people. They are overreactive and terrified of their environment and of the people around them. And that's what they would diagnose with that.
And this age is typically toddler or older?
Any child at that point. It can be toddlers, it can be children, it can be up to, I'm trying to remember what the testers even said. It's like 5, 6, 7, up to that.
Okay, because the only reason why I ask is like a 2-year-old, for example, going to like preschool is going to have a hard time separating from mom, but like a 5-year-old will be fine. So this test is typically for somebody, I would imagine, who's already gone through a program, who's like 5, right? Like that's
could
like
be
normal.
Could be. They'll do tests on toddlers and see. It's normal for mom to get up, and if mom sits in a room alone with the testers behind a window, and the baby's playing and kind of checks in with mom and plays and checks in with mom and plays. And then mom leaves and the child's like kind of crying, but then kind of curious and goes to play. Mom comes back, child runs to mom, checks in again, gets comfort, goes back to playing. That's what you would expect from a secure, like 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old. That's what you should expect. The children who are freaking out, and even when mom comes back, they feel like she has abandoned them and they're going to die. And now they can't let her go because she dared to creep off and they are afraid that they're going to lose her. Or the children who are so disconnected, they don't even care that mom left at all. Like, those are the problems. That's the beginning of what you would call anxious style, the freaking out and abandoned. And then the avoidance style is the ones that don't even care that mom is there or if she leaves. They just keep playing. They just completely check out and ignore her. That would be the avoidant attachment style that we would classify, and that we now classify in adulthood. It is what it is. I started talking to my clinical directors and saying, look, there is something here. Can we do, if we can't diagnose it, can we treat it? And they said, diagnose as you need to for insurance and treatment, treat the person as you need to. And I said, great, I'm going to start doing that. So I started, my specialty then became severe traumas and attachment, and the way especially those two things fit together. And I started piecing together how attachment was at the root of most of the disorders and most of the diagnoses in the book that we were treating, but we were treating them as if the diagnoses were the problem. Let's do this. So my clinic director started pulling me in to lead seminars for all the healthcare professionals. Like, this is changing treatment modes for people. Please learn from this guy. I wrote books on it. I published those. Those took off. I had therapists from all over the United States, Canada, internationally saying, like, I have your book. I'm working through this program with clients. Can you build a deeper program for me? And unfortunately, when you're a licensed psychotherapist in the United States, you can only practice in the state where you are. So there's 49 states I could not work with in all the countries in the world. So I had to make the choice about a year ago of, do I want to just work with people in my state, or all these people who are emailing me, begging me for coaching, can I open up and coach? So I cut my license and I said, I'm doing this. I went international. I lead seminars. I lead training programs. I've developed programs for people to work on their attachment. I have my YouTube channel with 250 video guides for people who don't have the budget to do the work, but they want to learn everything and do the work themselves. I've got everything now for everybody at every level, and attachment has become my life. So it started off like people telling me, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal, to this is what I do. This is all that I do now. So,
and this is a cornerstone, in your opinion, of really the way that people relate to one another, and how, like, the dysfunction that erupts when you're not clear on what your attachment style is.
Yes.
And there are 3 attachment styles, right?
3 insecure attachment styles that you need to be aware of. There's secure, which is the big one, the good one that you want to be, where it comes down to the belief that you can cooperate with most people in your life because they will work in good faith with you, and that you deserve to be worked in good faith with. That people will treat you fairly, respectfully. You can have healthy boundaries and you can cooperate. So your life is cooperative with the people around you, and you feel safe and secure in your networks because you know if you have problems, you will get help from other people. And if they have problems, you will help them. It's a thriving network of safety in numbers.
Okay, now secure attachment. Does that require a certain amount of trust, I would imagine?
Incredible.
And is it more that it requires a certain amount of trust in oneself or trust in others, or is it mutual?
Both. You must be able to believe that you are a decent human being who deserves to be loved. And the anxious attachment style says, I don't deserve to be loved. There's something wrong with me that makes people abandon me, so I have to cover it up and be perfect and earn approval. That's the anxious style. The other style is the avoidant style. No one else on earth is capable of acting in good faith with me. Everybody is out for themselves, so I have to manage other people's feelings and then convince them to do what I want them to do. That's the avoidant style. And those are the two ways that breaks out.
Quite like that before.
That's how they break out. If your parents didn't raise you to cooperate, if they punished you instead of disciplining you, if they shamed you, they guilted you, if they abandoned you, they neglected you, if something happened, your little child brain at 1 year old, 2 years old says, something is going on here. This must be how all people on earth are going to treat me. Either they're going to act in bad faith with me and hurt me so I can't let people in, or they're going to abandon me because they see something is wrong with me and I can't let people in and I have to earn their approval. Either way, I cannot open up and connect to other human beings. That's attachment. Attachment is the way we attach to other human beings. And that's why when that gets broken, everything else gets broken, because you cannot form deep, combining, cooperative, loving, intimate relationships at all. You just can't. Everything is a game, or everything is a survival mechanism that you have to play out.
Now, what if you have a couple where one is an anxious and one is an avoidant? I'm sure you get this question a million times.
No, probably. All the time. That is one of the most common pairings I see, because the anxious person says, I don't really deserve to be loved, so I can't let anyone get in too close to me and see that I don't deserve love. I just have to earn other people's approval, so I need to find someone who will give me that approval, but they never receive this chemical bonding hormone called oxytocin. So they are deficient on oxytocin and they're always craving it. That's the hormone release when you feel safe, secure, loved, connected. If you have high stress, it suppresses that hormone from being released, but you also need to be connected to people to get that hormone. And if your parents didn't give you that hormone in childhood that made you feel that way, then you go out craving it from other people, but don't believe that you deserve it. You feel like a perpetual fraud. They attach to an avoidant person who love bombs them, that saturates them with oxytocin. So you're the greatest. I've never felt this way with anyone. We're going to have an amazing future. You're so incredible. Here's these gifts. And they make them feel overwhelmingly treasured at the very beginning. And then when the avoidant person never gets too close, so the anxious person never feels challenged or scared, and the avoidant person feels great because the anxious person never wants to get too close emotionally. But then what happens over time is the anxious person soaks up that oxytocin and craves more and then starts chasing the avoidant person, who starts backing off and telling the anxious person usually, you are too much for me. You are smothering. You are too needy. I can't do this. Then they start backing off. And the anxious person doesn't say, wow, what's wrong with you? The anxious person says, what's wrong with me? You discovered what's wrong with me, didn't you? You are abandoning me like mom did. And they start chasing the avoidant person for 8 years, 20 years. They just stay on the hook, chasing. And the avoidant person keeps backing away. And eventually they may leave the anxious person, or they may settle into a really manipulative pattern where they keep the anxious person at like arm's length by telling them everything is their fault and they're just being too needy, and they gaslight them. And there's a number of things that can happen, but it's an ugly pattern, and they can maintain it till they have kids. And then the kids get really messed up. And then usually mom turns on dad and is like, you are making our kids so messed up. And dad's like, what do you mean? I'm the same as I've ever been. I'm fine. You married me. And they fight. And then the kids are teenagers, and then the parents get a divorce. And that's one of the biggest reasons I see for divorce nowadays too.
Can it be fixed?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. That's what I retired from therapy to be able to do is teach people to fix it. And that's the biggest message I have is this is fixable. The couple is fixable if the avoidant person specifically is open to fixing it. That's the hardest. That is the biggest lever. The anxious person is always desperate to fix it because they're just happy to hear that it might not all be their fault. They're just happy to hear there's an option. The avoidant person doesn't trust anyone to work in good faith. So then here's somebody saying, hey, you should just open up and connect to people. It's this thing called attachment. It takes them they hear my message, and it takes them months of following me to see if I'm a sham and I'm lying to people. And then they sort of like learn a little bit here and there. And then maybe 6 months later, they start thinking, okay, maybe I will check this out. But it takes a while to crack open the avoidant person and get them to really think about it. If they will, every couple can be fixed. It really hinges on the avoidant person.
What does it look like when an avoidant person fixes their avoidant self? What does that look like? Step one, avoid it.
Yes, stop avoiding. No, it is learning that they can open up and talk to their partner about some of the fear that they have that makes them want to back off without the person becoming angry, without the person then using it as an excuse to get too close, without the person smothering them, without the person being angry at them. Because remember, the avoidant person says no one's ever going to act in good faith. And if I lay all my cards on the table, I lose all my leverage to get my needs met. And people are going to get tired of being kind to me eventually, and they'll hurt me. So I can't lay down all my cards. Part of fixing attachment is learning that you can lay those cards down one by one and say, here's where I'm at. Here's what I need. Is this okay? A lot of avoidant people, they need to have a talk with their partner and say, how much sharing is too much? How much sharing will make you hate me? Not because there's something wrong with me, but you just don't care about my problems. And the anxious person says, please share all of your needs with me. I crave that kind of connection. And the avoidant person is like, what is wrong with you? But then they work. Then it works. And it's the open talking about the insecurities themselves and receiving acceptance, and then learning people will act in good faith with you. It is a slow process that avoidant person works through with their partner and a couple of friends or siblings or cousins, a couple of people in their life. 2 to 3 people is really what they need. And they open up and they build that, and then their brain learns, okay, there are a couple people who can act in good faith. I can get my needs met by talking to people. And it starts to rewire their brain from solve problems alone to maybe I can talk to people and help get some actual help solving problems. And that's a big game changer for their stress levels, because then it's not all them alone holding up the world.
I see avoidance in men and women. I don't think it's one or the other, right? I mean, I've seen it in both sexes. I am curious because one of the things I've noticed with certain avoidance is like they'll go the distance to avoid feeling to the point where they don't even know what their emotions are. One of the things that I do in my practice as a coach is I help people kind of get to the core of what their emotions are. And I do it using breath work, meditation, Reiki healing, different things like that. And then I've noticed that some of my clients who are really unattached to their emotions, they don't even know what they're feeling. That's why I kind of instituted breath work, meditation. I do sound bath circles, different ways to get people to get back into their bodies is because they don't even know what they don't even know. They have played this game so long of being so detached that they can't even feel their uncomfortable feelings. And so they do different things to avoid it, which is we know what those things are: porn, addiction to drugs, TV watching, whatever it is, to avoid feeling all those feelings. And I'm curious, like, if somebody has gotten to that point where they have avoided their emotions so much that they don't even know what their uncomfortable emotions are anymore, outside of doing body work, which is one of the only things I've figured out works. What are other ways that people can like really finally feel something?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's three steps to that. Number one is them, and when I coach people, I walk them through this process of you have never believed any human being on earth will ever meet your needs. So it was never a question of what your needs even are, because that was a moot point. It didn't even matter. All you've been doing is surviving. So we need to click you out of that survival mode into what would help give you those connections so that you could get your needs met. That usually some of the attachment work. We talk about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, you know this. And level one, safety. Level one is food, water, and shelter. Level two is safety and security. Level three, love and belonging. Attachment is not level three. Attachment is level two, safety and security, where you don't feel safe and secure because at any moment people could turn on you. They could take everything from you. They could abandon you. They could hurt you. So safety and security is the point that is actually being hit. That's still survival territory, the bottom two. So your animal brain is activated all the time saying, I need to stay alive. And so we don't have time to like, what are my needs? What needs do I have?
That's up at level three. Right. A lot of times what I hear, this is the thing I hear most avoidants say is, what's the point? What's the point of even going there? Why do I need to know what I feel? This is a waste of time.
Yes. And to them, their brain is surviving. Yeah, their brain is surviving, so they don't have the time or energy to put into feelings. They have had to survive for 20, 30, 40 years and just survive day to day to get through. And if they stop and think about their feelings, they'll be so miserable, they will crash, and then everything will start falling apart, and then people will hurt them. So diving into that is dangerous to them. Teaching them about the hierarchy of needs, teaching them about the survival mode, teaching them getting out of it, teaching them the needs, teaching them like, hey, this is normal. What you are feeling is a normal response to where you have been, but where you want to be is up here, and here are the steps we're going to chase. Then you start talking about with the feelings. They don't feel their needs because those are opportunities. They're down here at risk management. They're not up here at seizing opportunities yet. Level 1 and 2 is about risks. Level 3 and 4 and 5 are opportunities. They aren't there. So when you say, what are your needs? Like, what do you need right now? I need some food because my blood sugar's down. That's all. They can manage risks. They can't go for opportunities.
So they're not, they almost like constrict their thinking to create like super limited beliefs.
Yes.
They don't reach past that glass ceiling.
No, they can't. Their brain thinks that they will die. If they waste that energy, their brain thinks that they are going to get killed.
And I imagine this doesn't just affect their emotional lives, their relationships. It also affects their relationship with self, their relationship with their financial possibilities, their work. It affects everything. It makes everything just stay here instead of here, right? Now, for an anxious attacher, so I'm an anxious. Surprise. I host a podcast. And I think that for anxious, we feel everything all the time, always.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like every single emotion in my body is just like ding, 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 like all day, every day. It takes a lot of work to keep this thing going and to keep it all like, really relaxed. Not an easy feat. It's a lot of work. So what can anxious people do to, I use breath work, but other things, I use a bunch of things. It's not just breath work. I use a ton of stuff. I have a list, but what are things that you recommend that an anxious person can do to like calm themselves the F down?
So, yeah, a lot of it is when your logical brain, it diminishes to fuel those emotional spikes on the emotional side of the brain. So you are now logically diminished and emotionally spiking. And this is what the research shows with the brain scans of people who, especially the more severe you go in that territory, then you start ruminating on those thoughts and they're trying to process on the logical side of the brain, but they can't because the logical side is now diminished and disconnected. So you just end up spiraling, ruminating on those bad thoughts over on the emotional brain, which gets worse and worse and worse. And you start thinking of all the bad things that can happen because, again, you are in risk management mode for your whole life. You're not in opportunity mode of like, hey, what good thing could happen? It's like, how am I going to die today? And that's what that brain is doing. And every time it makes that pass, it gets more and more agitated. The thing you need to do to manage that, especially as an anxious person, is to crack that open and learn that your brain is not meant to operate in isolation. The human brain is meant to operate together in a collective with other humans. So when you are emotionally high and logically low, you go to a friend or family or a therapist or a coach or whoever who is logically high and emotionally low, and you begin talking through those fears with them. And as they are non-reactive to them and say, okay, well, yeah, I can see how that's troubling, they don't react to the threat. So your threat detection starts to decrease. And then you feel safe and secure with them, and you receive oxytocin and serotonin and some vasopressin as you're resolving the stress together. And your emotional agitation goes down, but your logical functioning starts to increase. And the other person will ask you pointing questions and say, hey, what about this? What about this part? Is this really that bad? What about this? What do you think might happen here? And you're activating the logical thought circuits, which is going to increase the logical functioning. So your brain starts to do this with their help. This is processing. Women do this especially well, typically with their female friends. And this is how women tend to communicate and help each other feel better, is this processing. This is why if a woman goes to her husband and says, hey, I need to talk about my feelings, like he's like throwing solutions at you to make you feel better. But you're like, no, I need to talk. That's you trying to do this and balance out. Then you will find the solutions yourself once you've logicked out. When people have anxious attachment, they can't do this with other people because they're afraid if they go to other people and open up about the fears and insecurities they're having, that person will say, wow, you have those feelings? Whoa, what's wrong?
You're messed up.
Man, you're messed up. I just realized how crappy you are as a person. I'm out of here. This relationship is
you
over.
Really are crazy.
Exactly. So they are terrified to ever open up because they're afraid they'll be told, well, actually, it is that bad and I'm leaving you. That's what they're afraid of, or ruining their relationships or being exposed as a fraud and unlovable and all of that. So they don't do that. So they are stuck like this all the time. The goal with fixing anxious attachment, and especially with managing those anxious feelings, is learning to open up and process those irrational thoughts with other people when you are trying to guess what they want from you, when you're trying to guess what would make them happy, when you're trying to guess what would fix the relationship, when you're trying to figure out if they're mad at you, when you're trying to figure out if you've done something wrong, when you're dealing with emotional impermanence of they tell you, I love you, you're so amazing, and you go, oh, and then they walk away, and 5 seconds later you go, but do they still love me now? It's been 5 seconds. And then they're gone for an hour, and you're like, I think they've forgotten all about me. So you send them a text, and it takes them more than a minute to text back, and you go, oh, the relationship is over. They don't love me anymore. And you're going through the breakup in your head, and they're over there like getting lunch and eating a hamburger. And that's the spiral. When you test those irrational thoughts with other people, you do this, you calm down and you relax. And that's what really helps. You require the help of other human beings.
So I would imagine that for an anxious attacher, the person that they would be paired with needs to also consistently allow the other person to have those big feelings. Like if those feelings are shut down, if it's like, for example, if I have big feelings and somebody's with me who I can't handle your big feelings, that to me is a trigger. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, because then they're going to leave you dead. They're going to leave you in the forest and you'll starve to death and bears will eat you. Yeah, that's the little 2-year-old brain saying, if I get abandoned, I will die. And it welds abandonment and death together in your brain. It freaks you out. So this is why An anxious person who tries to open up to an avoidant person gets shot down really fast because the avoidant person is scared, like, I don't want to get that close to anybody. So they start backing off, and the anxious person goes, oh, it was me all along. And then they try to get approval from the avoidant person for the next 3 months. They just spend their life trying to rebuild that love back. The anxious person, though, cannot just do this with their partner. You need 2 to 3 people, maybe 4 people you can cycle between when you have those irrational thoughts and say, hey, I've talked to you before about my anxiety, so you know what to expect. I'm having these stupid thoughts. My brain, not even me, my brain is having these stupid thoughts. You externalize it. My brain is having this stupid thought that maybe you're mad at me. Can you just let me know, have I done anything that I need to fix? Or is this just a stupid thought? And they're like, no, it's just a stupid thought. You're okay. And you go, and you'll feel better. You'll get a rush of chemicals. You're like, oh, okay. And then, really? Are you sure? Yes, I'm really sure. Okay. And you feel better, and then you're good, for the next week or however long. But when you've done that
15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But when you do this with a bunch of people, it does recalibrate your brain and make it wider and wider and wider between those gaps, to a point where it's every few months to maybe once a year. It really opens you up and fixes those pathways in the brain and makes it easier and easier. And then it just becomes rooting it out in every unfamiliar circumstance where you're like, oh, I've never been in this circumstance before. What if I make somebody really upset? Then you have to talk to them and be like, hey, just a heads up. Like, I sort of have these approval-seeking tendencies and I get these irrational thoughts. If that ever happens, can I just come to you and clear it up so it's not a problem between us? Yeah, you can do that. Cool. That's how you handle that. And that makes it so much easier to live as an anxious attacked person and become really secure. That's how you become secure.
And you've built this community in your practice, correct? You've built a community of people who, how does that work? Like, I think to myself, okay, if I do join Adam's community and it's a bunch of other anxious people, how does that work?
Totally. No, so my community attachment circle. Yeah. At first I was thinking, is it a good idea to have a bunch of people with attachment issues in one place? And then I realized it's right. When I fixed my attachment issues, it wouldn't have helped me to have secure people around me who didn't understand. It would have helped me to have people around me who had attachment issues, but also wanted to fix them. And that is,
and to call you out on it. Like,
and to call me out on it. Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So people come in, and I've got avoidant people in there, anxious people, and some disorganized people in there. And they come in and they say, all right, I don't know what to expect. Sometimes they just lurk for like 3 months first before they even speak. Sometimes they come in, they're like, I'm here, we're going to do the work, it's going to be great. And they're like flashy, and then they ease in. And then all of us say, all right, where are you at? Like, how are you doing? Here's some experience. Here's what we've done. And everybody starts talking to them. And then we do group events twice a week where we get to know each other and we talk about topics, and I teach and they ask questions. And then when people have problems, they come to the group and they say, guys, we've got like a urgency channel. Guys, I have this problem. I need some advice. And 3 people will pop in and say, hey, I went through that. Here's what I did that fixed it. And they're like, okay, that's what I should do. How do I apply that? And then I step in and I say, here's how to apply that in your circumstance. Here's what you could do. And they go and they do it, and they bring back the feedback. Like, guys, that went amazing. Here's the next thing that opened up. Or guys, that didn't work. Like, here's why it didn't work. And we dissect it. And we figure it out together. So it's not just people like stewing in their problems. It is people fixing their problems. And you get to see other people who have fixed their problems or are fixing them now and get support. And a lot of people just pop in and say, hey, I'm having this dumb thought. Is this normal? Yes, that's normal. You're on the right track. Keep going. You're not going off of the deep end. You have not messed up your attachment. Keep going. Here's some questions you could ask to fix that relationship. And they say, oh, great. And they pop back out. So that is what it's built for, is checking in.
This sounds amazing and terrifying to me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's why when people pop in, I say, zero pressure. You don't even have to speak. If you want to be on the group calls, leave your camera off and muted. Don't even be there. It's totally fine. Zero pressure. But if you want to connect as much as you want to connect, cool. And as people get in and start fixing those problems, here's what happens is they haven't got much oxytocin or vasopressin bonding hormones in much of their life, but they start getting those with the other group members, and they actually start building that connection and that acceptance. They admit painful things on the calls, and they talk to other people. They DM each other. They do video calls with each other off the group, and they start building those connections, which then really facilitates their local connections, because their brain says, okay, people can actually accept me, and this is how I can talk to people, and this is what I should expect from people who are good. this is what I should expect.
Reminds me a bit of like the Al-Anon meetings I used to go to when I was in my 20s. You know, like you come into a room and you know that everybody has gone through a family member who's dealt with addiction, and you don't feel crazy. You feel like, okay, we've all gone there. We've all been there. We've all done, you know, said the same lines, had the same experiences, and you start to feel like you can be in a trusting environment where you learn how to become more secure because everybody is creating that space for you to be that safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And the one, like I said, I was hesitant at first because I didn't want everyone to rip each other to shreds. So I oversee every message that comes and goes. I have to take someone aside and be like, hey, a little too much drama going on. Like, this is not acceptable here in this group. Don't do this. I haven't had much of that at all. Like maybe once in all the time that we've run the group, but Al-Anon is a great way to look at it because, you know, AA or NA, it's still people having relapses and people who are unstable. Al-Anon, people who've been through it because of their families. That is a great, great connection because attachment is so much about your families. People in there they come in and say, my mom, I had to talk to my mom the other day and here's what happened. And everybody else jumps in like, oh man. And they sympathize and they're like, okay, you're good doing this with your mom. Here's my mom. Here's what I did to fix that situation. Like, and they support each other. It is so much fun for me waking up in the morning and seeing all the messages on my phone because I don't turn off notifications. I love seeing them of all the group members supporting each other through problems all through the evening, through the night, through the early morning, those wee hours in the morning when you have no one to talk to. There's group members that are there.
I would imagine. I think that when I think about these kinds of communities, and you know, my husband and I have a big community that we've built, and I think one of the things that we try to do in our community is to create a safe space for people to be able to connect with one another. It's through connection that you can really have more oxytocin, right?
Absolutely.
And create more a sense of security. I have a few more questions. I know I usually try to keep my interview around 30 minutes, but I'm going to go a little over because I do have a few more questions.
Cool.
What are things that an avoidant says during a fight?
Ooh, good one. It is usually, keep in mind, that an avoidant person, when they meet you in confrontation, their brain clicks over to managing you like an object. It is not connecting with you cooperatively in good faith. It is to manage you like an object to maximize their pleasure and minimize their pain. They are not a sociopath and they're not here to maximize their pleasure at your expense, but it is to get their needs met and whatever their need is at the moment and to minimize the pain they're going to experience. So they will shut you down by saying things like, that's not what happened. That isn't how you feel. That's not how I feel. That's not true. It's denying. And people will ask, like, well, what's the alternative? The alternative would be this. It's, well, if that's what you're experiencing, then we need to deal with that feeling. That's what a secure person would say is, you know, I don't see it that way, but right? If that's what you're experiencing, we need to deal with that.
That's such a turn on.
It's huge. It's giant. An avoidant person will say, that's not how it is. You are being dramatic. You're making this too big. Your feelings are out of control. You're irrational.
Or they would do stonewalling or defensiveness, I imagine.
Stonewalling, defensiveness. I can't deal with this right now. I'm out of here. And people will say, well, some of these are appropriate. Yeah, sometimes. But shutting someone down 100%, like all the time, like, I don't want to deal with you at all, shutting it down. Let's continue this conversation in 6 years. Stuff like that, or deflecting, you know, whatever.
This is too much for me. I don't want to have this conversation.
Exactly.
We'll deal with this later. Yeah. We'll deal with this later.
It's managing you. Instead of cooperating with you, you are being managed during the conversation. That's what to look out for.
Okay. Good answer. Looking at my list here. Is a dismissive avoidant the same as an avoidant?
Ooh, you know, so there's avoidant, and then there's a lot of terms floating around because we don't have them regulated, which is good because then no one would be allowed to work on them unless they had a license. So it is good that they are not regulated. Dismissive avoidant tends to be what we just discussed. So avoidant attachment style exists on a spectrum where they're secure. Imagine secure is in the middle, anxious goes this way, disorganized is in the middle, it's because it's both, and avoidant goes off this way. There's the avoidants who are a little bit avoidant, who just want to be left alone. They don't manipulate anybody. They just stick to themselves. They haven't dated much, like 35 years old. haven't dated, haven't had a serious relationship. Maybe they've hooked up once or twice, but even that wasn't satisfying. They have a great job, high functioning, but they just leave me alone. And that's where they're at. It slides down the spectrum. Remember that narcissistic personality disorder is the extreme version off the chart. So the farther you get in the severity of avoidant, you pick up more and more narcissistic traits as you go that are manipulative, dismissive, hurtful behaviors as you slide that way. Think of it that way on a spectrum. That is the easiest way to really view the avoidant attachment. I talk about that because when I do a video like, hey, anxious people, if you deal with avoidant people, here's what you should expect from them when it's bad, and here's how to stay safe. And the avoidant people jump in the comments like, I would never do that. Why are you demonizing all of us? I'm like, okay, so I'll do another video and I'll say like, avoidant people aren't bad people. Some of them can be manipulative. And then the anxious people pile in, how could you say this? I've been hurt so bad. They are all awful people. And it's this
there's a spectrum, obviously. It's like, it's not all good, all bad. There's a spectrum. And we have to like, decipher that and realize that not everything is so black and white in this world. Yes. We love things to be black and white on social media, especially. I know we do. Yes, there's a lot of gray. You got to lean into it.
Well, when you think of it this way, when you have attachment issues and you are constantly managing risk, you want everything to be as black and white as possible so that you can know what you are dealing with. If you have good, secure attachment, you don't need black and white because you can look at opportunities and you can shift things out.
What is emotional impermanence? How do you fix it?
Ooh, let me see if I have something for this. Okay, I'll just do this. Here, I have a chapstick. This chapstick is somebody's love for you. This is somebody's, they love you. This is your husband saying, oh, you're amazing. You're so pretty. I love your hair. Whatever your husband says to you. You're so great and I love you. I will never get tired of you. I will never abandon you. You are so wonderful. And you're like, oh, I feel so reassured. I feel so safe. Oh, oxytocin goes. You feel amazing. And then that person walks away from you. And then that person is, they're at work. And you text them and you don't hear back from them. And then you say, oh, wait a minute, I forgot this one thing. And then you start thinking about it. And you're like, well, I haven't heard back from them. And then you text him and he sends you like a one-word text back, like, yes. And that's it. Yes, period. And that's it. You're like, oh no. And then like, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe you're okay. And you're sitting there thinking like, what is inside here? Does this person love me or do they not love me? And as time goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse. Now, this comes from object impermanence. Children, when they're 1 or 2, when they're like newborns, you take an object and you cover it up and they go, oh, and they think the object has disappeared because they can't see it. It's impermanent. Then you go, and they go, oh, it appears again. And they don't understand. This is one reason we play the peekaboo game that we train kids. We put a toy under a blanket, put the blanket on it, and if they pull the blanket off, they're like, aha, I knew it was there. That trains their permanence. Emotional permanence is supposed to be trained by your parents giving you consistent love. If your parents were inconsistent with that love or gave you no love, you don't believe it's possible for it to be permanent. So you expect it to open up like this and their love for you is gone. This is emotional impermanence. So fixing your attachment is reality checking with people like, hey, I'm having those irrational thoughts again. Like, is there anything wrong between us or are we good? Yeah, no, hey, we're good. Don't worry about it. You go, oh, and then you remember that the thing is there. And that's when you check in and you start building that permanence longer and longer and longer until eventually, functionally, you have emotional permanence again. It just you are so far between those gaps that you get the reassurance you need just naturally by being in relationships.
Amazing. Thank you. You're so fantastic. I'm so happy that you came on the show. Like,
Thank you.
If people want to get a hold of you, first of all, what is the book that you wrote? Because I'm going to buy it. I want to read it.
Here, I have a copy sitting over here. My talent agency says, keep a copy on your desk so you can show people. So here it is. It is called Slaying Your Fear by Adam Lane Smith. Slaying Your Fear. It's available on Amazon. It's got a cool cover. They put a cool cover on it for me. Slaying Your Fear starts the journey. Yeah, thank you. That lays out what is attachment. How do you know if it's broken? And what are some of the initial steps to start fixing it now? I wrote that book because I read Dr. Robert Glover's book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And it's like, I think it's 350 pages, maybe 400. And when I was practicing, I bought like 20, 30 copies. I was trying to hand them out to people and say, read this. It's amazing. You'll learn about attachment. And nobody would read a 350-page textbook. They just wouldn't. So I wrote a 100-page book that I could hand out to people and they would read 100 pages. Yes, the Cliff Notes. So I wrote the attachment books that I wanted in my style. and said, here's attachment, here's just the bare nitty gritty of what you need to know, here's how to fix it. And then you roll from that into everything else and start fixing attachment. That will get you started. So that's my book. Thank you. It's on my website, adamlanesmith.com. I've got my boot camp course on there that runs you through fixing attachment. Couples take that together and it fixes it for as a whole couple, as a relationship. I've got my community on there. I've got my coaching. I've got everything on my website, adamlanesmith.com. I'm on TikTok, of all places. I started a year ago, and my buddy said, Adam, you need to get on TikTok. And I said, I'm never getting on TikTok. And he said, no, really, people there need attachment help. And I said, well, yeah, but I don't want to get on TikTok. Now I stream on TikTok 6 days a week. So I do 6 live streams a week of answering Q&A questions and helping people there.
Cool.
So yeah, I just had...
get on TikTok with Adam.
I'm at attachment bro on there, which is what I am.
Very good.
I just did a video. I did a video on there 2 weeks ago. I got like 2.5 million views. It was talking about vasopressin bonding and how men and women how they bond differently, and how women, especially in hookups, women will bond often emotionally and men will not, because men don't bond the same way that women do. So women will develop feelings thinking the man will feel the same way, and no, he does not. And the pain that leads to, and how to make him bond instead, because men have a different bonding mechanism.
What is a man's bonding mechanism?
We have more vasopressin receptors in our brains than women do. And vasopressin is what happens when you achieve a goal together as a team, and his brain catalogs you as a person who is wonderful to solve problems with. Think of like men in the military. They bond for life because they've achieved objectives together. If you are achieving things with him and you can high five and say, we did this together, his brain vasopressin bonds, and he says, oh, I got to invest in this woman. And he emotionally invests in you and gets stuck and connected with you in a good way. And the research shows that this is what, number one, protects you guys if you go through a crisis. He won't spiral out and have an affair. He will work with you to solve the problems instead of freaking out, solving it alone, and then connecting to someone else. And number two, long term, this is also what maintains passion in the relationship, is the vasopressin bonding, because you're both vasopressin bonded and you trust each other and like each other. So it renews the honeymoon phase basically over and over and over. So
like
that's all on my TikTok.
How to play tennis together, or
learning skills together, rebuilding a car together, doing jigsaw puzzles together, escape room dates, taking cooking classes, taking dancing classes, teaching each other skills, solving problems in your family or your relationships together, remodeling your home together, anything that you could high five and say, we did it. Like you put up an IKEA bookshelf, if you could survive that process, like you have done it together as a team and achieved something, that's vasopressin. And that is, women bond this way too, but men bond way better and way deeper through vasopressin.
Ladies, listen to this. Good stuff.
Wow. There we go.
You just told all the girls who listen to this podcast the secret to having long, loving relationships. This was like, boom, done, mic drop.
That's what the research says. Just follow it and you will see the results.
And on the other side, if you want to woo a woman.
Women bond best through oxytocin first, because they feel safe, loved, and reassured and cared for. And that opens the door for them to do vasopressin bonding, because then they know they're not going to get abandoned in the middle of a project.
Right. And so for a guy, it may not. So what would the guy need to do for the woman in order for her to have that more oxytocin?
Here's what I tell people is, when you're dating and you're getting to know each other, talk about your principles and goals long-term of what you want to achieve together and what you can achieve together. And then build on your relationship based on what values you share in common and what goals you share in common for the legacy you're trying to create. Talk about that on your dates. And then see that you're close together. And then he should be praising her for where she's at with those things and saying, you are a great match for me. This is wonderful. I'm a great match for you. I value you. I respect you. And then he will work with that, and they'll start building a life together. And then she can fit right into that life comfortably and safely and not feel disrespected, not feel hurried, not feel rushed, not feel like she's only valued for her body or her face. That is where a lot of oxytocin starts flowing, because then he'll vasopressin bond with you and he will oxytocin bond with you as well. Hold your hand, be kind with you, listen to you, bring problems to solve together. All of that will oxytocin bond her as well. Women want to be valuable and cared for and respected, is a lot of what women are looking for in those relationships with somebody stable.
Yeah, I've actually seen a lot of women that I talk to who are in relationships, dating. And when the guy asks her, like, what do you do? And I really believe in you. I want to go to school. I think you should. When there's that kind of give and take, and the guy is super supportive and really sees her, going after her dreams, supportive of those dreams, that creates a lot of bonding and a lot of really good feeling.
Care and acceptance and encouragement, and just being with that person and giving them your time and attention and making them feel worthy of your time and attention. Those are wonderful things for oxytocin.
This was great. Thank you so, so much. I could sit here and talk to you a whole entire day. You're just delightful beyond.
Well, thank you. You are as well.
Thank you. And I know that our audience is going to just love this episode. I am so excited about it. And thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Nurture Series with Chava Florin. Catch us next time. Nurture this.